So what does this mean? Well, if the petition is converted to a liquidation under Chapter 7, it would pave the way for InfoWars to be sold.
Has any of this given anyone any indication as to how much? And the reason I'm curious about that is, can Hassan do the funniest thing ever right now? Alex Jones losing InfoWars. Oh, it took so long to get here, and here we are. All right.
Alex Jones tried to avoid the law, but it looks like the law caught up. And in the process, he's finally going to lose his shirt. Unintentionally this time. Yes, it looks like Alex Jones is going to be forced to sell off his personal fortune to pay off his debts. But it's not all good news. Unfortunately, it looks like he'll be able to keep hiding his corporate assets from plaintiffs.
I didn't believe we were this and we are this.
But Jones's most disturbing obsession has been denying the deaths of the 26 people murdered at the Sandy Hook Elementary School. For years, Jones and his associates have insisted the whole thing was a hoax and that the 21st graders did not really die that day, and in the process, he encouraged his viewers to harass the surviving family members. Jones's fans responded by stalking the families, both online and in person, and the families finally filed suit against Jones and won judgments totaling almost $1.5 billion in Connecticut and Texas. But so far, Jones hasn't paid anything on those judgments, instead funneling millions of dollars from InfoWars to himself and his relatives, at least on paper, all while claiming to be broke. Again, on paper. And he filed for bankruptcy, again on paper, before the Connecticut trial was over and eventually produced a suspicious invoice making it look like InfoWars owed his parents $54 million. And as a result,
I like, you know what, the game is the game. I gotta appreciate that move when all is said and done, because like it's just so blatant. It's like how dictators sometimes are like, I won that election by 99.9% of the vote, and you're like, oh yeah. So it's just like, oh yeah, by the way, so totally, you can come after all my assets. It just turns out I have to pay outstanding debts first, right? Legally, my lawyer said I have to pay my outstanding debts, and it just so turns out that InfoWars owes my parents $54 million. So I'm just gonna have to move that to them first. Outstanding debts, I know, yikes. And then afterwards we can start looking about what assets remain for you to acquire.
Bankruptcy proceedings have largely stalled the collections process for 2 years. However, things are finally looking up for the plaintiffs. Yes, the federal bankruptcy court in Texas held a hearing on June 14th to determine whether to dismiss the bankruptcy proceeding, which would be super bad news for Alex Jones, or convert it to a Chapter 7 liquidation, which would be even worse. Both of these options would allow plaintiffs to seize some of Jones's property at long last. And now that he's being forced to sell his property, Jones told his viewers that he's doing it all for the children.
It's been a hard fight.
This is wild. I gotta say, this is wild. First, this is cute. All right, this is big of LegalEagle, because I don't know if all of you know the history of me and LegalEagle. I've always enjoyed LegalEagle. I've played LegalEagle clips on my shows. I've you know, often been like, LegalEagle, I've made the joke, he's the one good lib. You know, that was me. I made that joke, and it all came to a head when I, as a fool, believed a one Illuminati. I don't know if y'all remember that fiasco when we had a leftist mafia co-host, Illuminati, who was telling me a lot of versions of the world that turned out not to be true. And I did believe her, and that included, of course, her accusations, and this one is on me, not on anyone else, fully on me. Her accusations that LegalEagle had in fact been infringing on her own art and artists and editors and style and stuff, which turned out to be ridiculous. And in that process, I had replied to LegalEagle with the phrase, "You were the one good lib." And H Bomber Guy, when doing a segment on Illuminati, got LegalEagle to read that line out. So I was like, man, the internet's wild. How I can go from just like a throwaway line, and I wasn't even being malicious, by the way. I was like, oh, you know, jokingly, like, you were the one good lib kind of thing, to LegalEagle reading that line out loud in H Bomber Guy's video, which now has 22 million views, by the way. I was looking it up the other day. That H Bomber Guy, the one on James, it's got 22 million views. Like, that's what? To this is wow. I gotta say, my faith was not misplaced. Twas good of me to say that he was the one good lib. And now I'm apparently a source in a LegalEagle video. Look at this. Hi, Mom. I did it. I'm in the Alex Jones LegalEagle video as a source on Alex Jones crying. Which also, I gotta say, this also seems as if they went the extra mile to put me in there, because you definitely could have just clipped this from Alex Jones's show. So much love, I gotta say, to the LegalEagle editing team.
These people hate our children.
So today we're going to talk about how we're getting to the end of the bankruptcy of Alex Jones and how it's super bad news for Alex Jones. Now, we've covered what happened at Sandy Hook Elementary many times. A quick recap on...
He stole your intellectual property, Lance. Get him? That's true, actually. Yeah, even though it is completely sourced, and it does say the source of the clip, and technically it's not even me reacting. I mean, that's more just like, did he transform that? Did Lance contribute anything to that clip, or did he just sit there and laugh at Alex Jones for 2 hours straight?
September 14th, 2012, a gunman murdered 20 first graders and 6 teachers at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Jones spent the next decade promoting lies about the massacre, suggesting that the government staged the shooting, that grieving parents were crisis actors, and that the incident was manufactured so that Obama could take away all of our precious guns. Jones used his InfoWars program to promote people like Jim Fetzer, a retired professor who wrote a book called Nobody Died at Sandy Hook. Fetzer spread malicious lies like the death certificates for shooting victims.
Hard to know what that dude's all about, you know? I mean, do you get what you pay for on the tin, or is it just like a clever title? Maybe it was just, you know, him calling into question people who asked that question.
Had been faked, and that a shooting victim's gravestone was actually a computer-generated graphic. He accused Sandy Hook parent Leonard Posner of being, quote, a different man named Reuben Wagner, who he insists is part of some international Jewish conspiracy. He claimed the children were actually crisis actors, and he claimed a whole bunch of other crazy nonsense. Now, InfoWars chief editor Paul Watson told Jones, quote, it makes us look really bad to align with people who harass parents of dead kids, but Jones was only too happy to align with people who harass the parents of dead kids because it helped him sell massive quantities of nutritional supplements. And so Jones made at least 20 more videos with false claims about Sandy Hook. But Jones didn't just lie to his audience, he encouraged them to investigate the situation on their own, and a court concluded that Jones intended to activate his audience. Millions of people watched and listened to InfoWars, and some of them stalked and targeted the Sandy Hook families and first responders. Now, eventually the Sandy Hook families had had enough harassment from Jones.
By the way, the same legal team that brought you that incredible civil lawsuit and victory against Alex Jones are currently taking down Tim Pool and Steven Crowder, so stay tuned.
Jones and his associates, so they filed defamation lawsuits against Jones, InfoWars, and related companies in Connecticut and Texas. Now, despite all the evidence that 26 people lost their lives that day, Jones broadcasted lies about Sandy Hook for over 5 years, and during a deposition in that case, Jones finally admitted what everyone else already knew, that the gunman murdered 26 people. Jones said that he had a form of psychosis that led him to believe it was all a hoax. Now, the Connecticut case went to trial, but only on damages because Jones refused to obey the court's discovery orders and failed to meaningfully participate in the discovery process. So after Jones basically refused to give...
I mean, he was also trying tricks in order to try and like make it too costly for them by just dumping information. It's like, hey, you need to provide us with the necessary documents that show your finances from point A to point B. And it's like, okay, give them hundreds of thousands of documents, then we'll see them. We'll see how many hours they can bank, you know, trying to look through it all and hiring, you know, legal teams and temps and blah, 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 in an attempt to try and bankrupt them. Like, truly scumbag behavior.
Any information about himself and his companies, the judge entered a default judgment on liability as a sanction, and the jury awarded the plaintiffs $965 million. The court ordered Jones to pay an additional $473 million in punitive damages. Jones tried the same tactic in the Texas case and was met with a similar result. And after a default judgment, the jury awarded the victims $49 million. Jones and his company, Free Speech Systems, now owe the Sandy Hook plaintiffs nearly $1.5 billion in damages. And so far, they have yet to see a penny of that money because Jones has claimed to be broke and filed for bankruptcy. Now, Jones first filed for personal bankruptcy, but since InfoWars is also liable, its parent company, Free Speech Systems, also filed for bankruptcy under Chapter 11. Now, Chapter 11 bankruptcy is the nice bankruptcy. It allows a person or company to reorganize, lower its debts, and continue as a going concern. Now, in 2019, Congress passed the Small Business Reorganization Act to make it easier for small businesses without a lot of assets to go through the bankruptcy process faster and with less oversight. This is known as Subchapter 5 of Chapter 11. Now, initially, Subchapter 5 was only available to companies whose debts were under $2.7 million. But once COVID hit, Congress raised the threshold to $7.5 million. Now, Jones thought he could outsmart the plaintiffs by putting Free Speech Systems in the Subchapter 5 bankruptcy proceedings before the Connecticut jury assessed damages. And according to the bankruptcy filings, Free Speech Systems reported $79 million in liabilities. But wait a minute, how did Free Speech Systems qualify as a small business if it had $79 million in debt? Didn't I just say that a company needs to have less than $7.5 million in eligible debt?
You did.
Well, Subchapter 5 contains a sneaky exception for insider and affiliated debt. Section 1182 of the Bankruptcy Code states that for Subchapter 5 eligibility, the term debtor means a person engaged in commercial or business activities, including any affiliate of such person that is also a debtor under this title, and excluding a person whose primary activity is the business of owning single asset real estate, that has aggregate non-contingent liquidated security.
I love that you can behind the scenes just see the exact conversation that happened between, you know, the Lionel Hutz that Alex Jones was hiring and himself, where it's just like, well, look, I think I found ours a loophole. Yeah, so if we go to 11 U.S. Code 1182, Subject A, Paragraph B, we can actually find ourselves a little bit of a loophole here that'll get you away with, like, you know, scamming those families.
And unsecured debts as of the date of the filing of the petition or the date of the order for relief in an amount not more than $7,500,000, excluding debts owed to one or more affiliates or insiders, not less than 50% of which arose from the commercial or business activities of the debtor. This means that if the debtor owes a debt to a company or person affiliated with the debtor, the debts don't count against the $7.5 million. So if Free Speech Systems owed money to one of Jones's other companies or to Jones himself, those debts don't count when calculating whether Free Speech Systems can elect Subchapter 5 treatment. And according to Jones's lawyers, his companies were exactly like the small family business that were intended to be beneficiaries of Subchapter 5. Except that Free Speech Systems owes $53 million to a company called PQPR Holdings. And guess who owns PQPR Holdings? Well, it's Alex Jones himself and his parents, David and Carol Jones. And PQPR Holdings is the company that supplies InfoWars with the supplements that he makes so much money on, nearly $500,000 a week. And if this all smells fishy to you, well, yeah, it's basically a giant rotted fish. Because Jones engineered all this, the debt, the bankruptcy, and the suspicious supplement sales, all in order to stop the plaintiffs from ever collecting on the damages award. And we know that this is what Jones intended because he said so. While the Sandy Hook verdict was being read, Jones urged his followers to pretty please buy the supplements. So Jones thought he was smarter than everybody else, and it sure looked weird that a company that made as much money as InfoWars somehow owed nearly $55 million to a supplement company. But Jones had figured that out too. In the words of Liz Dye, by sheer coincidence, PQPR forgot to build the company for a period of years, only remembering the debt when Jones's refusal to cooperate with discovery netted him default judgments in multiple states. Not that you needed more evidence, but David Jones is a dentist and Carol Jones is a homemaker. I guess they just forgot to invoice their son's company for about $54 million in supplements.
It happens. All right. Who among us has not had a debt to their parents for $54 million randomly on a company that may be filing for bankruptcy in order to protect, you know, paying out the amount of money that you actually owe the parents that you defamed? But hey, it's, again, we all go through these hard times.
See, InfoWars is a classic mom and pop operation. Now, the plaintiffs rightfully called BS on the entire scheme. As I pointed out, once Jones knew he was about to be on the receiving end of a massive judgment, he started transferring money out of Free Speech Systems. Quote, after the defamation cases began, the Jones debtors started transferring large sums of money to the Jones transferees. These sums included money that the Jones debtors started regularly transferring from Free Speech Systems to PQPR the same month that the default judgments were rendered. In fact, the month the default judgments were rendered, Free Speech Systems started transferring to PQPR between $11,000 per day and $11,000 per week, plus 60 to 80% of Free Speech Systems sales revenue, supposedly just to pay the interest on the alleged $54 million debt. Free Speech Systems claims these payments are part of the financial disentanglement between the two companies. In reality, their transfer is designed to siphon off the Jones debtors' assets to make them judgment-proof. You probably already knew this, but a fraudulent transfer is an effort to avoid debt by transferring assets to another person or company that are not bona fide. And the Subchapter 5 trustee assigned to the case investigated for 10 months and then filed a report concluding that, quote, based on the lack of corporate formalities, commingling of assets, and general course of dealings between PQPR and FSS, including Dr. Jones's clear involvement in directing which of FSS's creditors were paid, the trustee does not believe that the asserted secured PQPR debt is legitimate. The trustee also found that, quote, it is difficult to view FSS and PQPR as anything but one entity, and it's difficult to accept that the establishment of the two promissory notes with PQ.
Whoop. I mean, here's the thing though, the Lionel Hutz, he got paid. That lawyer, whoever was advising like Alex Jones, and he's like, oh, what am I going to do here? They're coming after me. They're going to take everything. Oh, I'm so fucked. I'm so screwed. And it's like, well, I've got a plan. You've got living parents, so you could actually say that your parents have a debt that this company owes, and then make that debt really big for the amount of money that you want to like keep away from those families. Say like $50 million. What about $54 million? Sure, yeah, $54 million. Transferred from one of your companies to your parents and say that you're simply paying off a debt that you owed them. Then, hey, you can just walk away from this, declare bankruptcy, and then be like, I don't have any money. I lost it all. But all the money will be in your parents' pockets, who hopefully, if you trust them, they'll be able to transfer some to perhaps a new company that you form. InfoWars 2 got a good ring to it.
PR were merely coincidental.
Hey!
And so far, the bankruptcy court
2 times. Yeah, that's right. Hell yeah. I mean, none of my witty commentary or banter, unfortunately. Just more of a cheers. But I'm there. Looks like I made it.
Is yet to rule on the trustees' report. Meanwhile, Free Speech Systems is still grinding through the bankruptcy process. The parties were supposed to collaborate on a reorganization plan, but Jones stymied that by proposing that the first creditor in line would be PQPR Holdings, meaning that the mom-and-pop supplement shop would get paid before any of the parents of the dead children. And Jones is following the same pattern he established in the defamation cases, stall by making ridiculous arguments while the plaintiffs followed the rules. But notwithstanding, the plaintiffs kept their eyes on the prize. Their ultimate goal has been to dislodge the bankruptcy filing so they can begin the collections process against Jones and his related companies.
Makes sense.
And right now, they can't do anything without the approval of the two bankruptcy trustees. So the plaintiffs filed a motion arguing that the defendant's debt should be non-dischargeable in bankruptcy.
Does anyone know what LegalEagle's political stances are? I would say from the way that he aggressively attacks Trump and, you know, a handful of unfair labor practices, probably I would situate him around the sock demi kind of area. You know, you're probably like in John Oliver kind of bubbles.
Now, we've talked about this before. Non-dischargeable debt is a type of debt that cannot be eliminated through the bankruptcy proceeding. Most student loans are not dischargeable in bankruptcy, and same with alimony and child support, as well as state and federal taxes. And the Bankruptcy Code 11 U.S.C. 523 lists all of the types of non-dischargeable debts, including those which are, quote, willful and malicious injury by the debtor to another entity or to the property of another entity. Now, that section exists to punish debtors who commit egregious and intentional acts. And the plaintiffs have argued that Jones is engaged in all kinds of fraudulent transfers and that he shouldn't be rewarded for his moral turpitude. Now, the bankruptcy judge concluded that the judgments were fully and fairly litigated, despite Jones's many complaints about not being allowed to put on a defense. And the bankruptcy court decided that most of Jones's acts that gave rise to the defamation and other claims were made with the requisite mental state. Judge Christopher Lopez said that the Connecticut State Court had clearly determined that Jones's conduct was willful and malicious, and this finding was, quote, also necessary to the judgment and the jury award of damages. Judge Lopez said, quote, these are specific findings about an objective certainty of harm and a subjective motive to cause harm in connection with the defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress claims. They are not, as Jones argues, superfluous findings about intent related to the plaintiff's harm. It is irrelevant that the state court could have awarded damages on reckless acts. What is important is what the court actually did. Here there are findings about a deliberate and intentional act meant to cause injury, not just a deliberate act that leads to injury. The state court also considered the additional factors listed above, but the focus remained on willful and intentional acts and not on a lesser standard like recklessness. In sum, the state court made specific findings that went directly to the amount of punitive damages. They were necessary to the judgment. So summary judgment is granted on the debt for CUTPA punitive damages. Judge Lopez ruled that almost all the damages were non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. $1.15 billion of the damages owed to the Connecticut plaintiffs and $4.3 million of the damages owed to the Texas plaintiffs. Now that was a big win for the plaintiffs, but that was all the way back in October of 2023. At the moment, the case is still sitting in bankruptcy court and the plaintiffs still can't begin state court proceedings to collect on the judgments. Meanwhile, Jones has been having meltdowns on his show, calling on his viewers to join hands and form a circle of human shields around his Austin studio.
I just want to...
Wow. 3 times. I'm one hell of a source. I'm the source, the authentic source on this story. That was a great job of covering that. It's got to be, I'm assuming at this point, one of their editors must watch my shit. Hey, good to see you. Hey, tell LegalEagle you should come on the show. I'd love to interview him. Seems like a good lib.
Stop these people. They gotta be stopped. We gotta stop them.
Now, obviously, if you're Alex Jones, you need a good bankruptcy
I wish I was better dressed that day, to be completely honest with you. Watching Impact now, I'm like, God damn, I look ridiculous. Yeah.
lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, my law firm,
I wonder if LegalEagle considers you the one good leftist. I hope so. I hope it's mutual.
the Eagle team can help. If you've gotten in a car crash, suffered a data breach, especially got one of those data breach letters saying your information might have been leaked, or are dealing with a work, this has now lingered in
if you enjoy the work of LegalEagle, support LegalEagle by going to the channel.
bankruptcy for almost
I cannot tell you whether or not it is good legal advice because I have absolutely no idea.
2 years. At this time, FSS has no prospect of a confirmable plan of reorganization and has failed to demonstrate any hope of beginning to satisfy the Connecticut family's claims. As the court has made clear, it is time for the FSS case to come to a conclusion. The relevant question at this juncture is how it should come to a conclusion. So the plaintiffs propose converting the bankruptcy petition to a Chapter 7 liquidation. As they argued, quote, a Chapter 7 conversion would allow a trustee to pursue approximately $4 million in potential preference claims that have already been identified by the debtor. The Connecticut families firmly believe the interests of the estate and all creditors would be best served by conversion as opposed to a dismissal of the FSS case in light of the unique circumstances. Jones's public statements over the past 44 hours, which expressed his belief that this court will, quote, wash his hands like Pontius Pilate of the case and thereby enable Jones to regain control of FSS and frustrate creditor claims, even if it requires physically blockading FSS's offices, only reinforce a significant need for conversion. The families point out that while this case has been stalled in bankruptcy court, Free Speech Systems is hemorrhaging money. Quote, total cash on hand and receivables have decreased by over 50% since the petition date, all while FSS has incurred nearly $2.3 million in professional fees since the commencement of the FSS case. FSS's failure to effectuate substantial consummation of a confirmed plan constitutes independent grounds for cause to convert the case. 2 years have passed and FSS has failed to propose any viable plan of reorganization, much less one with creditor support. So what does this mean? Well, if the petition is converted to a liquidation under Chapter 7, it would pave the way for InfoWars to be sold. Free Speech Systems reportedly had about $4 million in cash on hand at the end of April, with $1.9 million in expenses. And since Free Speech Systems owns InfoWars, it would be sold. Judge Lopez.
But we don't know, like, has any of this given anyone any indication as to how much? And the reason I'm curious about that is, can Hassan do the funniest thing ever right now? Could Hassan Piker effectively afford to buy InfoWars and do whatever he wanted with it? And again, turn it into whatever Alex Jones hates the most, you know, like start like George Soros presents the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, woke mind virus, trans ideology hour hosted by the Gay Frogs, something like that. Could you, maybe too wordy, you know, maybe you shut it down to Furry Wars or something like that. But just things that Alex Jones hates. Could you essentially turn InfoWars? And would you get the studio? Would you get those like massive LED screens that he's got everywhere where you can sit in the middle of it, you know? He said he will. He said in stream. I'd like, please do that. Please. Honestly, it's so much better than some of the expensive things that Hassan buys that people like go after him for. It's like, Hassan bought a house. How dare he? I don't think anyone's going to oppose Hassan buying InfoWars. I think even the most extreme leftists who are like, he's a fake leftist. He's not a real communist. He's not ushering in the communist revolution. He's not the vanguard. Even they would be like, okay, that's kind of funny. Yeah, I get it. I got to give it to him there. That is one hell of a move.
Has ruled that Free Speech Systems can continue to pay its 44 employees their wages and other expenses until the June 14th hearing. And Jones's lawyers.
Yeah, I don't know if the Knowledge Fight guys are that big. Are they? Maybe they are. I don't know. I love Knowledge Fight. I listen to it every week. I'm a big Knowledge Fight fan. I just don't know if they can afford, like, we're talking, you need to have a lot of cash for this, right? Like we're talking still, it's going to be upwards of like $10 million, isn't it? At least. Just for, I'd say, the InfoWars assets in that ballpark. I don't know. Again, I have nothing to base that on, because I don't think anyone can afford to buy the pill factory. That is the one that's worth like 50 million, 100 million, 200 million dollars. Like that pill factory fucking prints cash. That's the whole fucking basis for all of this. That's why everything Alex Jones does is about keeping you scared to buy his fucking pills, like constantly. Like, oh yeah, the deep state is coming. They're destroying society. They're going to remove all your testosterone. You'll have low T levels. You'll be soy boys. You'll grow breasts if you're a man. You'll grow a penis if you're a woman. You have to stop this. The only way to stop this is to buy my super manly paleo man skin, which is made from real chickens and the most high T-cell chickens we can find. Buy it now or you will become a soy boy with massive soy boy titties. Like that's basically essentially the whole grift.
Said it's possible that Free Speech Systems would withdraw the bankruptcy petition. The court could also just dismiss the bankruptcy case entirely, and in both of those circumstances, the plaintiffs would then be free to start the collection process in state court. Though at the same time, the plaintiffs might actually prefer to have the petition converted to a liquidation, simply to ensure that the court retains jurisdiction in the bankruptcy court to rule on that bogus debt attributable to PQPR Holdings. And then there's still the matter of Jones's personal bankruptcy. At the end of May, Jones told his fans that, quote, this is going to be InfoWars' last show because I learned yesterday that they were going to padlock the door and kick us out last night. Jones said that the feds were wandering around his 127-acre game ranch, and the court gave Jones the green light to sell that ranch. But of course, Jones didn't actually stop broadcasting. He returned on June 1st with claims that the government had padlocked the ranch, but then reversed course after an audit, which is, quote, totally blowing up in their faces right now. But all this is, of course, just grift theater. The show is still broadcasting, and Jones asked the bankruptcy court for permission to liquidate his personal assets. Many of Jones's personal possessions and some real estate would be included in the sale, with the proceeds probably going to the Sandy Hook plaintiffs. And it looks like Jones currently has about $9 million in personal assets. And of course, the plaintiffs know they'll never see anything close to the $1 billion from Jones. They offered to settle for $85 million, but Jones would only go as high as $55 million doled out over 10 years. And after the latest hearing, the bankruptcy court agreed to liquidate Jones's personal assets. But what about the fate of free speech systems? Well, one day before the hearing, Subchapter 5 trustee Melissa Haselden filed a scathing status report announcing that the parties could not find a consensual resolution that would have allowed for a Chapter 11 plan. As a result, she recommended converting all of the proceedings to a Chapter 7 liquidation. Haselden expressed her concern that Jones' quote, increasingly poisonous rhetoric, including slipping back into post-petition unsubstantiated theories related to these Sandy Hook shootings, creates potential additional financial harm to the estate. Notably, Haselden found that Jones is still promoting Sandy Hook conspiracy theories, quote, since June 7, 2024, Jones initiated repeated on-air attacks of the Sandy Hook plaintiffs, including promoting new conspiracy theories, continued denigration of the bankruptcy process and publication of the CRO's photo, and a recording of a telephone call with the CRO, questioning who has authority over the company and that he, Jones, is in charge in all regards, and urged viewers to sponsor and support his father's product since InfoWars is dead. Basically, Jones is promoting his father's company, quote, because his father knew InfoWars would be shut down, and urges viewers to support his embattled family by purchasing from drjonesnaturals.com, and that drjonesnaturals.com has emergency stuff backed up. And Jones made it clear that he was doing this as an end run around the bankruptcy proceedings, saying, quote, wherever we go in the future, whatever happens, that's my dad's company, and he's going to be a sponsor for the future. And although Jones mentions his InfoWars store, he, quote, always alludes to the fact that Jones believes InfoWars may be shut down and not deliver products to his customer, which he later walks back and tells customers it may be their last chance. The trustee claims that Jones is also trying to get rid of years' worth of videos on the InfoWars site. This is problematic because, quote, this content is owned by the debtor and is property of the SSS estate. The trustee believes that some or all of this content is available to the public for free download. However, SSS content should not be used for any commercial purpose by any person other than the debtor. The value of any FSS property should inure to the benefit of the debtors, creditors, or Jones' impending Chapter 7 estate. The trustee is focused first and foremost on employee safety and security. The trustee is also very concerned about the preservation of assets of the estate and payment of administrative obligations incurred during the bankruptcy, including professional compensation, but more important...
I love this. Summary of options. How to deal with this situation is a conundrum. I'll say. I mean, we have a basically professional liar / pill salesman, a literal snake oil salesman. I think one of his products is some kind of oil tincture, right? So we got the snake oil salesman who's doing everything he can do to try and like get away from actually having to pay his debts, right? Is not a man of responsibility or honor. So he's slippery, all right? So yeah, I would say conundrum is a very good way of describing it.
Certainly all tax, employee, and costs of business operation. The trustee is concerned about both the behavior of Jones as well as the potential behavior of some of his viewers. Jones's behavior in the recent broadcast is much more erratic and unhinged than his typical rhetoric. Haselden said the court must address questions of authority because, as of right now, employees don't know who they answer to, Jones or the trustees. Without these issues being addressed, quote, FSS Security will not know whether to take direction from Alex Jones or the court-appointed responsible person. So because of all that, the trustee recommended a Chapter 7 conversion. Quote, the trustee believes that there is inventory that can be sold, which would likely yield greater value if sold in a wind-down as opposed to a non-operating debtor. There's also potential value in the InfoWars platform. There's a potential for value loss if the debtor does not operate in an orderly wind-down. A conversion would permit the potential value of avoidance actions to be retained. But the court rejected the trustee's recommendation, opting instead to dismiss the bankruptcy petition. So InfoWars will not be sold and Jones can stay at the helm of free speech systems. He can continue to appear on air and spew the same rhetoric that led to this case in the first place. And although the plaintiffs can start collection proceedings in Connecticut and Texas, they are divided about that particular outcome. The Texas plaintiffs are pleased with the results, while the Connecticut families preferred to see InfoWars shut down, even if they received less money. At the hearing, the Connecticut plaintiffs, the U.S. bankruptcy trustee, and the Subchapter 5 trustee advocated for Chapter 7 for all the reasons discussed in the trustee's report. Alex Jones has acted in total bad faith before, and after the verdicts against him, the debt to PQPR is fraudulent. He's shoveling cash out of his business to family and friends, and he's going to keep spewing his conspiracy theories about the plaintiffs. They also preferred to keep the court-appointed restructuring officer at the helm of free speech systems rather than see Jones retain control of InfoWars. So if Judge Lopez agreed to convert the case to Chapter 7, then the bankruptcy court would retain jurisdiction over the case and over supervision. But the plaintiffs had different incentives. The Texas plaintiffs are Scarlett Lewis and Neil Heslin, parents of 6-year-old Jesse, who was killed at Sandy Hook. Heslin and Lewis did not join their Connecticut counterparts because the Texas plaintiffs stood to gain more financially if the case was dismissed. And here's why. Heslin and Lewis got their judgment first, but it was much smaller than what the Connecticut Sandy Hook plaintiffs got. It was $4.1 million in compensatory damages and $45.2 million in punitive damages. And there's a good chance that the Texas Supreme Court will eventually reduce the amount of the jury verdict because Texas law on punitive damages only allows plaintiffs to collect up to twice what was awarded in economic compensatory damages, in addition to the amount awarded in non-economic compensatory damages, which is limited to $750,000. The upshot of this is that if the appeals court reduces the punitive damage award, the parents could wind up collecting only about $4.8 million of that $50 million verdict. And if the case was stayed in bankruptcy court, then the 20 Connecticut plaintiffs would have been entitled to a much bigger pro rata share because they were awarded $1.5 billion. If there is no bankruptcy, then all the plaintiffs can just start the collections process, and they don't have to wait to see each dollar distributed according to who is owed the largest share. And if there is no bankruptcy, then Free Speech Systems is not in liquidation, meaning that the plaintiffs can just go right ahead to state court with no waiting. So the Texas plaintiffs were willing to take their chances with Jones back at the helm of Free Speech Systems, and that's ultimately what Judge Lopez decided to do. He felt it was in the best interest of all creditors to allow plaintiffs to go through the state courts. The bankruptcy court can only babysit a company for so long. If Free Speech Systems was in Chapter 7 liquidation, then there would also be a lot of fees to the various trustees, accountants, lawyers, and other professionals who were brought in to oversee the liquidation, and that shrinks the pool of available funds even smaller. So, in essence, Jones succeeded in pitting two sets of plaintiffs against each other, and now the Texas families will try to outflank the Connecticut families in state court, and probably vice versa. And what does that mean for InfoWars? Well, as for the actual broadcast, probably nothing. The show is still on air, and of course, the more money InfoWars makes, the better it is for plaintiffs, theoretically. Although the Connecticut and Texas plaintiffs disagree about that. The Connecticut Sandy Hook parents and their lawyers say that they'd rather have InfoWars off the air. But even if InfoWars went away, it's unlikely that Jones would ever shut up about Sandy Hook. And he'd still be able to start another company and produce shows saying all the same things. But right now, Free Speech Systems is in the hands of a court-appointed trustee. That's because Jones is the owner of FSS and Jones is in personal bankruptcy.
Yeah, it seems like this awkward situation where on one end, Jones is saying, this asset is worthless without me. I am the Alex Jones show. I'm literally Alex Jones. You need me to make these assets valuable. And if you're trying to liquidate this all, then it's going to be worthless without me. And then on their end, they're like, yeah, but we just don't want you to keep doing this terrible, horrifying shit on the world stage. And so we would prefer if the entirety of InfoWars was simply liquidated. And sure, we don't have any control over what you do next.
His shares of FSS are up for grabs during the collections process, and Jones observed, quote, "I do not now own InfoWars. It is now controlled by the court trustee. I'm the CEO and the decision maker. Now a personal bankruptcy trustee will assume control over Jones's interest in Free Speech Systems, and the trustee's job will be to maximize the value of Jones's ownership interest in Free Speech Systems. And although that could mean forcing the company to be sold, I'm not sure that that would add a whole lot of value to the company itself because the company's value is so closely dependent on Jones's personality. Free Speech Systems has about $6 million in cash, and the plaintiffs will probably fight over that money. And as long as the company is a going concern, theoretically, it can generate more money that could eventually go to the plaintiffs. Though it does allow for the possibility that Jones will continue to play shenanigans and just siphon money out to his parents and friends. And as a result, the Connecticut plaintiffs asked Judge Lopez to issue orders directing how the trustee managed Free Speech Systems, but he indicated that he would not do so. He said, quote, "I was never asked to shut down a show today. That was never going to happen." And you can see how this would be unfair to the plaintiffs. Jones acted in bad faith in every lawsuit filed against him, and he refused to follow court orders, which is why there are two default judgments. He filed for bankruptcy before the two court verdicts, and then filed under Subchapter 5, and then invented a fake $54 million in debt. And he's diverting assets from FSS to his dad's supplement company, and after the hearing, he was preaching on the courthouse steps about how the grieving parents were part of a vast conspiracy against him. But on the other hand, it's possible some of that might be clawed back, and as a going concern, it's generating more revenue that might eventually pay off the plaintiffs. Though if I were Alex Jones's parents, I probably wouldn't do much with that money because people are going to be scrutinizing it. Now, meanwhile, the plaintiff...
Interesting. I'm pretty sure that ship has probably sailed already. I mean, I'm guessing the $11,000 a week that apparently is going to them to pay off just the interest on the made-up debt that they are owed by Alex Jones's companies. I'm pretty sure that money is probably going into a variety of different things already.
to file a lawsuit in Texas alleging that Jones allegedly diverted money from FSS to other companies, and they allege that Jones withdrew at least $18 million from the company. Now, if you were going to completely revamp the InfoWars show to stop lying and make logical sense, you'd probably need the power of AI. And a great place to start converting Jones's gibberish.
Okay, we're into that. Well, hey, it was pretty wild to see myself featured not once, not twice, but thrice in the new LegalEagle video. So that's that was fun. Also, kind of depressing learning about how Alex Jones is kind of succeeding in delaying this as long as humanly possible, and at every turn he's got some new scam that's working out in his favor somehow. I don't know how this dude is so slippery when he's so fucked up and it's so obvious, like everything is just very, very clearly laid out on the table, where it's like, hey, by the way, he's not actually bankrupting, he's only doing this to try to avoid paying for all this kind of stuff, and his parents aren't obviously owed $54 million in some kind of like, you know, oh yeah, I just forgot to mention that, but our company does owe $54 million to my parents, so we got to pay them out first, and then yeah, I'll totally see what's happening with everything else, you know. We'll try to sort all the other problems that we're having.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We first want to give a shout out to everyone who makes this show possible. This program is produced thanks to the generous support of our Patreon supporters: Anna Loves Riley, Arian McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hagbar Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Multi Mondi, Omni, Peanut Butter Blondie, Political Poppy, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Richard Bomey, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Ruby, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demmel, Travis McClinton, and Words Greenwood, as well as every other person you see on the screen right now. This show would not be possible without them. And if you want to join these wonderful people who make this entire program possible, simply go to patreon.com/theserfs and you can unlock uncensored and bonus episodes and, you know, help us exist.